Scions of the Southland for August 3rd of 2025. My name is Jack Purdy. We've got Jake Grant here. We've got Akshay Easwaran here. It is August, which means I started thinking about football things. I was watching some old football videos for other related projects. And I don't want to wait 20 days for Farmageddon, but I guess I'll just wait 20 days for Farmageddon at this point. Jake, you had some, I guess, statue news to report before we get going on our main body of content here.
I don't know how I haven't mentioned this existing before, 'cause this is now the third time I've flown from Rhinelander, Oneida County Airport, which is about as far north in Wisconsin as you can go before you hit the Michigan state line. It's the last county before you hit Vilas, and then up there it's up north beyond that. But anyways, half this airport, maybe not half. You got your like two check-in desks, you got your little baggage claim, and then over on the left-hand side, it's a Northwoods Sports Museum with like I think it's life-size, like shoulder and up wooden carved bust of John Heisman.
Huh.
Because apparently, John Heisman, who listeners probably know this, but in case you didn't, 222 to nothing, Cumberland win, national title in 20 in 1917.
I'm sorry,
I
are
wish.
you
I
explaining
wish.
John Heisman to Georgia Tech
I,
fans?
I am explaining John Heisman to Georgia Tech fans. But anyways, when he passed, he was taken by train. His body was taken by train to Rhinelander, which is where his wife was from. His second wife, as he famously, got a divorce and then was left to leave Atlanta because his wife got Atlanta in the divorce. But anyways, I thought that was weird. I thought that was interesting and kind of one of those odds and ends to bring us back into the show. But that's obviously not why we're here today, gents.
Well, hold on. Did that statue look more or less like Heisman of this compared to the statue we have next to Bobby Dodd Stadium?
The one at Bobby Dodd Stadium is definitely more Heisman looking like
Okay.
if any of the other pictures are to go off of. It's did I send a picture to you guys? I
You
I
did. You
think I
did. You
did.
did. You did.
It looks kind of
It's odd.
it looks kind of ghostly. I don't know. I would the famous picture of him with Tech Tower in the background where he looks like he's about to like separate your soul from your body. That kind of look that he has looks nothing like that. But
I will.
he aged. It could be that's what John Heisman looked like as an old man. So
I'm gonna put that photo in the post for this episode on the website just so people can have a look.
On
And
go for
YouTube,
it.
this is just going to be the only graphic for the entire
oh
episode.
god.
That's
Oh
the
god.
only
This
they
is
have to
his blank
stare.
eyes.
Oh
They
no.
have to stare
I,
into this wooden
oh no. I.
statue of John Heisman
Oh
forever.
dear. Oh dear. Probably
It's
not.
it's
Probably not.
a brilliant example of the Northwoods' second most famous export besides tourism, and that is wood. So there you go.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. We are here today because in our usual summer programming, we try to find some topics that we don't get time to tread one during the usual sports season, which runs anywhere from mid-August to the depths of June if we're lucky with baseball. Today we have Eric Steagall, who works at Georgia Tech. He's in the Department of History, what was it? School of History and Sociology under the Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts, where he studies the most famous Georgia Tech athlete to ever exist, and that is Bobby Jones. Eric, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Always happy to talk about Tech and Jones, and especially over the summer.
It's what we needed. Firstly, I guess give us a little bit of your background so people know where you're coming from. How long have you been at Tech? How'd you get to Tech? What's your connection with the school right now?
Yeah, so I enrolled in the Ph.D. in history program at Georgia Tech in August of 2019. So I moved here 6 months before a global pandemic. That was pretty interesting. But yeah, so that was my first year, and I just finished my sixth year actually in the PhD program. I successfully defended my dissertation a couple weeks ago.
Hey,
Um, yeah, thanks. So this has been a project basically that I've been working on since, I mean, for almost 5 years. But long story short, I study sports history, really a focus on modern U.S. history, but then American South, golf, and I can get into later on how I stumbled on Bobby Jones. But as I'm sure you all know, I came to Georgia Tech to study under Dr. Johnny Smith, who is one of the renowned sports historians in America today. And so yeah, so for 6 years I've been just learning the craft.
Johnny Smith is
And
our preferred professor of choice if we got to pick anyone to go back to on campus. Uh,
I was gonna
Go ahead,
say,
Jake.
I think between the three of us who are normally on the show here, at least two of us went out of our way to take his class. So I
Yeah.
feel like this is very receptive ears for this. For those that aren't familiar, he's done it all from Muhammad Ali and boxing. You've got 1918 Spanish flu, influenza. You've got John Wooden in Westwood. Like he's really all over the
Mickey
spectrum.
Mantle.
So Mickey Mantle, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you came here to study with Dr. Smith on specifically Bobby Jones, or did you have that in mind when you came down here in the first place?
I mean, so I grew up playing golf. I wasn't a country club kid. I was actually I was a caddy growing up. But I loved golf. I played hockey my whole life, played baseball my whole life. I love sports, and I went to the University of Missouri first, but I had learned of Johnny back in 2018, and I should say that it's very rare to find not only a sports historian in academia, but then one who's located in a history department. Because basically wherever you get your PhD, that's what you're considered. Like there are some sports historians who are in a kinesiology department or a English literature, but the fact that Johnny is located in a history department, I was like, well, this is perfect. I'd like to study under him and get PhD in history, and really really kind of learn the approach as both a historian and a sports historian. So
It is truly
Gotcha.
what everyone comes to Georgia Tech for, is to become sports historians for their
well, that's the
doctorate.
funny
For their
that's
doctorate.
the That's the funny part. Like whenever people ask me, like, "Oh, so you're doing your PhD at Tech?" Oh, and what? I'm like, it's like I always have to say history, and I kind of follow that up with, believe it or not, there's a history department
Yep.
at history and
Yep.
sociology department at Georgia Tech. I mean, you'd be surprised how I mean, very few people know that,
Yeah.
even PhDs at Georgia Tech.
It's good. It's good. I'm going to go through a quick primer of Bobby Jones for those who may not be familiar with him. So Bobby was at Tech from 1918 to 1922. He graduated in 22. Um, Eric, I know we talked about this before, but the golf team was basically essentially made for him because people knew he was a good golfer before he got to campus. And then it's like, oh, he's coming. We should probably have a golf team. And then the golf team started. Do I have that right?
Yeah, if I were to speculate, I mean, they started it a year before, that was back then. So he graduated from high school in 2018. So they had started it a year before that because
Gotcha.
I would assume it was a recruiting tactic.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. That makes
yeah.
sense. He was the first person to win the golf Grand Slam. Now, back then, the Masters didn't exist, and we'll get to that. So he won the equivalent version. The term was he was the first one to do it, so they coined the term for him, if I'm not mistaken. The Grand Slam is wholly Bobby Jones's fault. He was the
Uh-huh.
president of the Tech Alumni Association from 1931 to 33, and I mentioned the Masters because he helped create the tournament. He had a little house on the course that people would come and visit him when they played there. He played professionally only. I say professionally. He was an amateur. His whole stick was he was an amateur golfer from
Mhm.
23 to 1930. Retired at the peak of his powers. Who the hell knows what he would have done if he played until his body gave out?
Mhm.
Went to Harvard after Tech for law school, and then for those that have been to the East Lake Golf Course here in Atlanta, it's effectively a Bobby Jones museum. The whole place is devoted to him. That was his home
Mhm.
course, and the first place he ever won when he was a boy. So, Jake, I know you're about to explode. What do you have?
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify something. I was always under the impression that he went to Emory Law as well.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
that was
So
part of
he
his journey as well,
He went
right?
to Harvard. Yeah, yeah, you're right. He went to Harvard for just another bachelor's degree. Honestly, most people get it wrong and think that it was like a master's in business. It was literally another bachelor's degree in English literature. This was and this is kind of what I argue in my dissertation. I mean, this is kind of like he really didn't have much of an identity outside of golf, and this was his way of trying to look to see what else did he find interesting in life. He also had this idea. He tried asking. I found old papers. Harvard was very generous and giving me some of their archival materials. He wanted to dually enroll at Harvard as both a bachelor's, earning a bachelor's degree at the same time with law school, and Harvard said, "No, you're not doing that." So,
Awesome.
They're
Uh,
like, nah, we can't abide.
yeah.
Fair.
to set the stage into your angle, what was your angle into studying Jones? Like, what actually got you to be like, okay, this is a character in sports history and greater American history at that made that caused you to be like, all right, this is my next 5 years of my life.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, it was a couple different reasons. It's like whenever you're starting a project, obviously, you want to your everything is guided or based around a research question. But in order to find those research questions, you got to figure out, okay, well, what has already been written, what hasn't been written, what are the opportunities for me? And um, as I mentioned earlier, sports history, kind of like as I'm sure you guys are aware with sports journalism, is kind of considered the toy department within its respective discipline.
Fair.
And
Yeah.
I understand that, but um, there was still a lot of opportunities to not only talk about Jones and golf in America, but to use those as kind of prisms to understand different, more, I guess, wider cultural moments and developments in the 20s. And if you look at just, there'd really only been one other historian who'd ever written anything scholarly or even like a biography about Jones. And those who had written about Jones really never talked about his connection to Atlanta and the South. And it's a huge oversight because in the 20s, I mean, there was still a huge regional differences, regional distinctions, regional tensions that were taking place. And as I'm sure you all are aware, Atlanta was, it was like the self-styled capital of the New South, and like this trying to improve basically, city building, trying to improve Atlanta's national reputation. So I kind of looked at it through the lens of his significance as a Southerner, and then as the project carried on, really much of the project became focused on the idea of amateurism. Amateurism is a gigantic topic right now. We talk about NIL and transfer portal, but mainly it's like, well, what is the difference between an amateur and a professional? A lot of these questions we're asking today were these questions that were taking place in the 20s, and this is kind of when it really started. But it was deeply ingrained as like this amateurism versus professionalism was a very interesting debate at the time. So,
At that time, I mean, he's walking into a golf scene that's largely still dominated on the British shores too. Like and on the northeastern part of the country, like the
mhm,
southeast as the right now. I mean, right now, if I tell anyone where the home of golf is, like I'd say it's somewhere. The geographic center is probably somewhere below Tennessee and above like Fort Myers, and maybe somewhere close down,
absolutely.
somewhere in there is because the Masters is in Augusta. The season ends every year at Eastlake. Sometimes
Hmm.
Atlanta Athletic Club gets a tournament, and there's 18 tournaments that happen in Florida and up the eastern seaboard, and then
Hmm.
there's only two that we acknowledge. Like that,
Texas too.
yeah,
Yeah.
Texas gets a lot as well. Um, that was not the golf world that Jones walked into at all, though. Like,
Oh
what
no.
was set the stage for what was when Bobby gets onto the scene nationally? What is he walking into as a? I say professional golfer. I know it's not the case, but at least in the
Yeah.
big golf scene.
Yeah, well, so he debuts in 1916. This is a year before America enters the Great War. He's 14 years old. I mean, he's the first, for all intents and purposes, he's the first a modern American sports prodigy, and he
Mm.
could do that in a sport like golf. He couldn't do that in football. He couldn't do that in baseball. But so there's a couple different angles. But you talk about the Northeast as like this, the Northeast, New England, New York, and then even parts of Chicago those were the hotbeds of golf. The South was a golfing wasteland. I mean, no one had. I mean, it was still, there's still very. It was only two generations removed from the Civil War.
Yeah.
It was still incredibly rural. Uh, Golf was not. I mean, it was a very class-based sport, as it still is today, but much more so. And when I was talking about amateurism and class before, amateur golf was actually like, if we think about the prestige or the importance, amateurs were higher than professional golfers. So when you were talking about the Grand Slam earlier, two of the four majors were amateurs. So the US Amateur and the British Amateur were the
Mm.
other two majors, US Open, British Open. And that demonstrate, it's very instructive of how deeply ingrained in the class structure of America at the time, specifically the Northeast. And he was a product of that. His father became a lawyer for this new company in Atlanta that produced soft drinks. They called it Coca-Cola.
Huh.
Um, and his grandfather owned basically all of Cherokee County, Canton,
Mm. Yep.
Canton, Georgia. So I mean, his mother came from a very very wealthy family too. But it is this regional perspective when he gets to Marion. It was called Marion Cricket Club at the time, outside
Yep.
of Philadelphia. I mean, there were people there making fun of his Southern accent. They were making fun of him the fact that he was wearing pants and not plus fours.
Mm.
Um, I mean, there's a host of other stuff I can details I can get into, but yeah, I mean, this at this time, the South was a backwater. Like, who would ever? The South didn't produce any golfers ever
Right.
up to that point, and if they did, it was a professional who had come here from Scotland to teach a few people. Um, I can keep going, but
No,
I
that
think
was good.
that's
That was good.
yeah.
That was good. Yeah.
I gotta try and draw a parallel here for some of our audience, maybe more, football, basketball, baseball oriented. And this is me leaning on having taken Johnny Smith's class like 6 years ago at this point. So you can feel free to steer me out of a ditch if I'm going that way. But could one say that the perception of amateur versus professional golf is very similar to the perception of amateur versus professional football at the same time? College football versus kind of the ragtag bunch of like that was something that transcended sports, right? Not just a golf thing. Is that a
Correct.
read on the situation?
And
Okay.
you're absolutely right, Jake. Professionals were um, it was almost more amplified in golf, though. So yes,
Okay.
it was
Gotcha.
across the board. Professionals were the hard scrabble, bruisers, uneducated.
Mm.
They spent their time not in, they didn't really they didn't finish high school, they didn't finish middle school. They were these, sons of immigrants, Eastern European, Southern Europe. They were, out late at night, chasing women, getting drunk in saloons. They were not right for polite society.
Okay.
And actually, a fun. You're absolutely right in that. That's actually why Jones's father, who was a hell of a baseball player, actually, he was offered a contract by the Brooklyn Superbas, who became the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Coming out he went to UGA, that other school east of here.
Uh,
And his grandfather, so Jones's grandfather told his dad, if you sign on that dotted line, basically you're dead to me. He was going to disown him because of that
Yikes.
stigma of, and it was more amplified not only in golf but in the South as like this the honor code of male honor among white Southerners. It was very much about appearances for sure.
Well, I was going to add to that too. I remember from Johnny's class, going back to that, like this was a very Victorian era kind of hypothesis of amateurs being more pure of spirit when playing sport. And so connecting some dots here, the Southern, like the post or like the pre-war South, and then I guess the post-war South too, having that idea of aristocracy and going
Mhm.
back to Victorian era aristocracy, like you can kind of draw a pretty direct line into why that might have been amplified in the South too,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it was so class based. It was so elite. And it's interesting what, using the term aristocracy too, because where golf really became popular, at least in the South, was in the cities, like outside of Atlanta, in Atlanta, in Birmingham, in Nashville. And most of these men or most of these families were actually not aristocrats. These were but it was a weird it was a
Like
very
new money?
interesting, yeah, new money.
Huh.
They were kind of like the new South. A lot of the old money came from more rural areas.
And
But yeah.
I was gonna say that's interesting, contrasting that to the Northeast. You said Marion Cricket Club. If I know one thing about
Hmm.
Marion, is that is like mainline for those who are
Yeah.
not. I married into a Philly family, so that I get some of this
Oh,
on the
okay.
side, right? That's like the upper crust of Philadelphia society, and at that time, you had Boston, New York, Philly. Those were your
Hmm.
three big,
The big three. Yeah.
old money Yankee like type of class. So very interesting to hear
Hmm.
the comparison of that to the South and it picking up with, maybe not carpetbaggers, but new money,
Hmm.
post-war wealth, and in a very different sense but a very Atlanta sense versus,
Right.
plantations and
Well,
Terra and that kind of thing. Right.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and it mirrors a lot of the growth of why college football became so popular in in the New
Mm,
South. It's like they're trying
right.
to mirror the Northeast.
Yep.
This is their whole idea, is to try to, it's their own version, because they're still incredibly racist. They're positioning white supremacy at the forefront of society, but um, this is their whole way of like, oh, okay, well, if we can play football, we can attract more Northern capital, and it's these
Mm,
new businessmen, not the old money. That was a lot of those were Southern Baptists, and there's a religious aspect here too about the Jones story that's different between his dad and his grandfather. But that was the whole thing. Your body's a temple. You don't want to exert doing anything with playing football is that's against what a lot of Southern Baptists believe. But yeah, it's the same type of parallel when trying to improve reputation, improve relations with the North, and then also ultimately attract Northern capital.
That stems right into Georgia Tech's origin story, which will be a podcast. We have I don't know why we haven't done that as a show, but we probably
we
should.
just we just need to do that as like put it on any day of the week, not like a time capsule episode,
Exactly, exactly,
Just-
exactly. Um, that's all very fascinating. So all right, there's your 10 minutes on what life was like for sports in the 1920s. How does Jones then start fitting into this? What's his place in all this in the New South, new money, taking over a sport that was not, I'm not gonna say not meant for Southerners, but like was not expected to be dominated by a Southern man
Mhm.
by at this time. How does he get in? Where does he fit?
Yeah, well, so it's kind of almost like three-pronged, but I would say first off, I mean, he spearheaded the transformation of the image of golf in American
Mm,
society. I mean, yes,
okay.
it still is kind of, we think about country club, old white Protestants who are overweight. It's like a game of leisure as opposed to a spectator sport.
Right.
And when Jones is this 14-year-old boy from the South who's playing against grown men and beating them is very, it challenges a lot of what the common knowledge, or the common image of what golf was in America at the time. Because if I don't know if you guys know, golf was still relatively new. I mean, it was
Yeah.
the USGA was founded in 1896. Anywho, so he's kind of leading this spearheading, changing the image of golf, in terms
Mm,
of, okay, yes, he's from a very wealthy family, but now all of a sudden a bunch of people who the masses, the growing middle class in the 1920s are just smitten with this kid. Even before the 20s, they were, he basically encourages a lot of other people to start picking up golf, because it's a game, it's not only a game for old men, it's for kids, it's for all across the US. But um, there's still a very interesting like amateur dynamic here, because when we think about amateurism, this was like as I said, the biggest conflict in American sports world in the 20s. I don't know if you guys have heard of Red Grange, Harold Red Grange. He was the U
yeah.
of I running back. Last year, actually, it was the 100-year anniversary of his game against Michigan when he ran for like 4 touchdowns or whatever. Um, they had like their old leather helmet looking helmets or
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah.
I think Jenny
Some of the
Taft
worst
dressed up
jerseys
as,
ever made, ever made.
yeah, yeah. It was very interesting. But anywho, I bring up Red Grange because just to demonstrate how contentious the amateur versus professional debate was, not only in golf but across sports. There was a YMCA leader who went on record at in a newspaper and compared Red Grange's decision to sign a contract with the Chicago Bears, which the NFL wasn't even a big thing yet, to killing his own mother. It was I
Yikes.
like
Hmm.
these are the amateur. This was part of the culture wars that were going. We talk about morality, or like this greed and the emerging consumer culture. Like when we think about the 1920s, there's a lot of mythology that almost overshadows a lot of the darker, more conservative elements of the decade. Most people were not flappers, or what F. Scott Fitzgerald would call part of these people who drinking all day, and most people still had very traditional, defined conservative values, and with this emergence of the consumer culture and money and commercializing sports and people like Babe Ruth and uh, Jack Dempsey and Red Grange, a lot of people were very, very apprehensive about this. And I guess just to kind of answer your question about where did Jones fit in with this, what I argue in my dissertation is, most historians have called this they've criticized the image of the golden age of sports. The 1920s, yes, it was the golden age of sports for white men. There was Babe Ruth, Jack Dempsey, Lou Gehrig. I mean, even Walter Hagen in golf, but he was a professional. That's an entirely different story. But uh, the fact that Jones was kind of the face of his sport is really all that he had in common with these figures. Babe Ruth with baseball, Jack Dempsey with boxing. Jones was the only one from the Deep South or the South in general. He was the only one who was like actually well educated, who pursued advanced degrees, law school. He had his own business enterprises, or at least he tried outside of just his sport. He was the only amateur among them. And he was the only one who was born into a prominent family where he didn't have to work for his living. He didn't grow up working with his hands, toiling in manual labor. He didn't play his sport for upward social mobility. And yet there was still this, even the masses, working class folks just adored Bobby Jones all throughout the country. It's a very, very interesting dynamic that was taking place at the time. And it wasn't just the rich people. It was working class people who were very threatened by these new quote unquote modern values. That he was only playing his sport for the love of the game. I mean, he was just as important. He was just as famous internationally, and probably more famous internationally than Babe Ruth. I mean, he was just a gigantic. He was the biggest, most famous Southerner at the time, but he was also one of the most famous, celebrated Americans.
Right, because he was playing on foreign soil too. Like
Oh
he had
yeah.
those two tournaments a year on British grounds, which effectively is if there is a media world in the 1920s, if that's about as good as the spies you can go get.
Hmm.
European attention is over there in the British Isles. So yeah, no,
Hmm.
that makes a lot of sense. Um, you mentioned his popularity. I want to loop Tech into this discussion a little bit. Does that do anything for Tech at all? Does his is there much association with this guy came from Georgia Tech specifically as he's vaulting himself into the higher tiers of the cultural zeitgeist in America?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because, and I think that's a little harder to measure than like, popularity is inherently difficult to measure because it's very like, okay, well, what are the metrics for it? But you could see that he was famous as an American figure because of the editorials that other newspapers were saying
Yeah,
or writing or whatever. But it's difficult to say how much or what he did for Georgia Tech in the early 1920s. I mean, he always said that he when when I looked at his letters when he was much older in life, there would be people from Harvard who were asking him for donations, and he'd say, no, my allegiance or my first loyalty is to Georgia Tech. Like he himself was very loyal to Tech, but I don't know how much it improved the national, and I'm sure it did. I'm sure it made Americans be like, oh well, if Georgia Tech has this amazing person as its undergraduate student, um I just don't know, and I think that's something I probably could have explored a little bit more in my dissertation. But as I said, he really only played 1 year
yeah,
of informal golf at Georgia Tech.
Well, and the thing about that too is if you think about the landscape of Georgia Tech in the late 1910s, right? That is one lorded over by Heisman and arguably the greatest football team ever invented in the South up to that point. So I could definitely see the argument of it, like if he's playing this one informal-ish year there, that's not a drop in the bucket the same way as 222 to nothing national title football.
Yeah.
right.
Not that football drives the ship, and we're the first to admit that we try and give other sports their due and things like that.
Yeah.
But definitely quite a crowded marketplace versus 18
But on
year
top
old
of
who's
that
still
too,
relatively new, right? I don't know.
But on top of that too, it's also the other side of the coin of what is the view of Georgia, the Georgia School of Technology's academic and national profile at that time as well. And you're talking about still a pretty small regional school that doesn't invest in its national profile until it becomes the Georgia Institute of Technology in the 60s, right? So it's interesting to compare, or at least maybe it's not as easy of a comparison as like, okay, Bobby Jones is winning all these tournaments and that's exactly where I was going, Jake. You put it in the chat. Like, is there a Flutie effect in 1916? It's like, I wasn't thinking of the Flutie effect, but I was thinking more in terms of, Nick Saban winning national championships at Alabama and driving out of state enrollment to Alabama
Yeah.
from places like California and the Northeast that are also sharing in some of this, like, I don't know, that maybe we're drawing too high of a lens, but like thinking about the type of students that come in from like California and the Northeast to Alabama to be in, like, I don't know, when you think of Alabama, you think of like that Southern aristocracy, like especially with all
Yeah.
the Greek life too, like getting plugged into that and then going back out into their more high
It's
class,
performative.
upper
Yeah.
class. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes
So
sense.
there's a lot of different threads that you can pull at with that too. But I think to that, getting back to the Flutie effect point, it's like the Flutie effect and then the Nick Saban, that kind of enrollment effect, I think is also driven partially by a media network effect that does not exist at the same point in time in the 1920s, the late 19 teens, right? And so maybe it's hard to judge the two against each other.
So real quick, actually, you bring up great points, and I think what would one big interest too was like yes, golf was Jones was driving golf into becoming a mass spectator sport, but golf in college, I mean, golf did not become an NCAA affiliated sport until 1940. It was still it was not, at least in football, it was like, I feel like football was so much more the quote unquote front door of the university.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about Alabama's win in 1925 with the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
I guess that was January 1st, 1926, but you get my point. But
Yeah.
I do think that actually what you're talking about, like the Nick Saban effect, I mean, before Nick Saban, there was not, a Porsche dealership or Gucci dealers outside of, they have all these brand name retailers outside of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Um, it's like that is
Yeah.
clearly that is very easy to see that Nick Saban effect. I'm not actually as familiar with the Flutie effect, so if you could just explain that like I'm five.
Akshay, go for it.
Oh, Flutie effect, also like the Florida Gulf Coast effect. It's like if a team gets massive TV recognition, it generally, in some way, so deep NCAA tournament run is the thing I think of with Florida Gulf Coast. It drives enrollment, it drives
Okay.
applications,
And
that sort of thing.
Doug Flutie specifically being undersized might be the word, Boston College quarterback that led BC to a miracle win, I think at the Orange Bowl at Miami in the 80s at the height of their Miami-ness.
The Eunice.
Yeah, in football. Yeah.
Real quick, my girlfriend's grandfather, Jim Mahan, was actually a ref at that game.
Oh, well, there we
Yeah.
go. Okay.
That'll work. All right. So Tech's, I mean, I'm knowing some of my stuff on the academic side, Tech's image really doesn't get kicked off until really the 20s when ROTC shows up, and then in the 40s they win the Guggenheim Award that launches the aerospace school, and that really does a lot to put them on the map beyond, I think, what Jones ever did. Which should
in
make sense.
1916, it was half a trade school type of reputation.
It was a
very
trade
much
school
so.
with the best football coach of the era. Like that was what we had going for us at that time. But at the same time, Bobby's still maybe he's not representing Tech. Not representing Tech. He's not putting Tech on the map. But he's still emblematic of Atlanta's effort as being like driving this new South creed going. Would you say that's more of what he's pulling with him than anything else outside of the sport itself?
Absolutely. And real quick, but before I guess I should say that I think he probably did improve the reputation regionally of Georgia Tech.
Fair, yeah.
I think that was probably, but Absolutely. I mean, it was he and his father, his family rubbed shoulders with, some of the big, commercialists, civic leaders in Atlanta, during he became a symbol of Atlanta that was, very carefully constructed by other people. He did not, he hated the spotlight. And that's
Yeah,
another thing that made him so different. Like yes, he was incredibly modest, but he was incredibly anxious, insecure. He didn't like the attention. Like he just hated being the center of attention. And so when a lot of other people, created this image of him as like this archetype of what Atlanta can be, this um, this Atlanta spirit, the spirit of Atlanta. That's like
yep,
the first
yep.
journal article that I wrote. But absolutely, they used him for political purposes. Like, in 1926 and 1930, he had two ticker tape parades in the span of four years. I believe he was the first Southerner to have a ticker tape parade in New York City. And then I believe he was the first, if not one of the first, to have two ticker tape parades. But that is the people who orchestrated that was the mayor of New York City. And then also a guy named John S. Cohen, who owned the Atlanta, or he was the president publisher of, the Atlanta Journal. He
Mm.
was very high up in the Democratic Party. And at this time, the Democratic Party was incredibly split. There were different blocks. There were different different section, whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but it's so
Yeah.
obvious you can draw the direct line of North and South using Jones to not only improve North and South, relations, but then also for political benefits. And then Atlanta, he also became the symbol of like, hey, look at us, we have this golfer, and you can, really fusing the idea of Jones and golf with, modern progress, the business world. Up until then, it was like, yeah, of course, these people are, rich people played golf. But now it's like younger business executives or younger aspiring, business professionals really, forging this combination of doing business on the golf course or just golf as like an, expression of a thriving business community.
Yep. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Go ahead.
What I'm hearing is Ivan Allen Sr. would have loved Bobby Jones. That is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And, I believe it was Ivan Allen Jr. who had the, Forward Atlanta campaign in the 60s. Um,
Yep.
that was the Forward Atlanta campaign 2.0. The first one was in 1925 through 1929. One of the chapters I argue is that, I mean, they used golf and Jones. They put in the copy of the ads, they said, basically saying, look at our golf courses. We have the world's greatest golfer in our city. This is why Atlanta is forward movement to try to get northern, manufacturing companies investment stuff.
I don't have time, but well, I feel like there's a connection here. Just what came to my mind. There's got to be a way we can connect Bobby Jones to how he got the Olympics. I don't know how you draw those lines, but I feel like there's something there in just
No,
terms of the because we're talking about very similar things that were argued by the
yeah.
ACOG and the Billy Payne's group about like, okay, here's what we
Mhm.
have here, bring it here. It's a not dissimilar story at all.
It's the same sentiment that's being passed down, even from, and you can even draw the line back further to Henry Grady, in the
Yep.
80s, 1880s, I should
Yep.
say, with this idea of the New South, Atlanta, the self-described. But yes, it's they're using the same sentiments, or they're using the same verbiage when they're talking about kind of merging sports and business and modern progress, or however I say that in air
Yep.
quotes.
Right.
It's wild how many of the same threads and the same characters within those threads you can see within that, and we can take all sorts of left-hand turns off of this. I was tempted to go start flipping through some books on my shelves, but in the respect of time, I think I need to put a lid on that one because otherwise we could probably go all day. So
Um, an actual skill question in terms of how good he was at golf. If he plays past 1930, he goes as long as his body lets him play good
Mhm.
amateur, major level golf. Um, how what how far does his career go? Do you think? Are we talking like this dude has a major level that no one's going to touch because he just could win them all because he was that good compared to the field? Like where are we?
Mhm.
Because he's still considered, at least in the golf world, the first greatest golfer Tiger Woods existing does complicate if he's the best or not, that kind of thing, and just courses, places, playing things like that. But like
Nicholas, yeah.
Nicholas, people like that. But how do you think that conversation maybe changes if he doesn't stop playing? I say professionally, but in the top tier golf.
Yeah, as a high level competitor. It's a great question, but I mean it's impossible to know because, well, for starters, that was the beginning of the depression. So like after he wins the Grand Slam, I mean this is the ultimate mic drop in my opinion in sports history. You
Oh,
know,
it is.
winning
You're
the
right. Yeah.
single season grand, and no one's ever won. I think since him more than two majors in the same season. He won all four in the same season, and then he retired. Um, he also, his mental and physical health just from competitive golf was real. I mean, he looked like he was 28 years old when he retired, but the stress and anxiety that he had from playing, and this is before we knew really, or people talked about mental health, especially for men. I mean, he would lose up to 20 pounds in 3 days because he was so stressed. So I think it was actually a matter more of, it wasn't just, he didn't retire because he wanted to get on with his life. I really think that, I mean, golf was killing him.
Hmm.
I mean, we didn't know anything about flexibility back then. I say we, but I think it would, if he had, historians are not very good at speculating and probably shouldn't, but I think it would all like depend on how much did he actually want to keep going.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw this. Scotty Scheffler had that 5 minute a couple weeks ago, right before the British Open.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of what he talked about, the sense of fulfillment that he didn't get from golf, I don't think he articulated it as well as he could have. But I mean, he was kind of just going off the cuff.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the same sentiment rang true for Jones. Like he would win a tournament and he would be just the first thing that he would say is, "Oh, I'm so glad that's over." But then
Yeah.
he'd be like, he was so ill, and he'd be throwing, he couldn't digest food because he was throwing up. There was a time where somebody had to cut his tie off of him with a knife because his neck was so swollen,
Ugh.
and just because he was so stressed and so anxious, couldn't eat anything, couldn't sleep. I mean, he's chain smoking cigarettes the whole time. Like golf was really, really harmful to his health.
Mm.
So I don't know. And then after in 1930, when the Depression begins, golf goes through this weird purgatory phase where it's like, I title my dissertation "The Last Amateur," subtitled Bobby Jones in Golf in the 20s. Jones was not the last amateur golfer. He was not the last amateur to win a open tournament. But I call it the last amateur because he was really the bookend, the other bookend of amateur dominance in golf.
Right.
Because they're, then by the after World War II, that's kind of when this new phase, especially by the 50s, when TV become, with Arnie's Army and all this kind of new prevalence of golfers. But who knows if he would have still kept going in the 30s because of the Depression. Would he
Yeah.
still have, like, he had a lot of different responsibilities with his family. He was having other business interests. Golf was it professional? Like, what was going on in the golf world at the time was basically like, it was in a state of flux. And so it's really difficult to say. I mean, I'm sure if all things considered, all things stayed the same, I'm sure he would have won more. How many more or how much? I mean, he's still remembered as probably definitely in the top five easily.
Yeah.
Golfers of all time, most likely in the top three.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd be surprised.
And
Good.
I was gonna say, and I'm gonna, not try and skirt around too many questions here, but I think that's where it becomes a really interesting question that we've kicked around here a couple of times of like Mount Rushmore, top five of like Georgia Tech athletes ever. And it's like, where do you draw the line between how somebody contributed to a sport versus a place versus the athletic contributions within the sport? Obviously, there are things that Bobby Jones did outside of literally hitting a ball with a stick, right? That contributed to the growth of golf as a game that also contribute to the legacy that he leaves. And so I think that's just a really interesting item to kick around too, because if he's still playing it, who's to say that he's doing all these other big picture things, if you will, that he's doing? He's in the 40s.
Yeah, I mean, you're
in terms of legacy.
Absolutely right. I mean, it's the butterfly effect, I guess if we're really just kind of simplifying it, the sliding door of like, just you make one change, and who knows how much. I mean, he founded Augusta a year later, after he retired in 1930, and then the Masters tournament, which by the way, he hated the term the Masters. He thought it was too pretentious. I mean, he was probably the most humble superstar in sports. It was almost puzzling how modest he was, and a lot of that had to do with his insecurities. But who know? Yeah, I mean, we just don't know. I think that I think his legacy is still just very synonymous among golf fans with the game.
I'm glad Scotty Scheffler is at the peak of his powers right now as this is happening because the comparison is striking how close it is. To go back
Mhm.
on your point about last person to win all four, the Tiger Slam did include 3 in the year 2000. He won his Pebble
Oh,
Beach.
is that right?
He did this Pebble Beach one where he won by 15 shots in 2000. Then he won at St. Andrews, and then he had that classic Valhalla win against Bob May in the playoff, and then won the 2001 Masters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, but that was in 2001.
He's the first one to win 3 in a year since Bobby. Yeah, because I think you had said no one won 2 in the same year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait, did you say it was 2000 or 2001 that he
2000
won those?
he won 3 in 2000, and then calendar flips wins the 2001 Masters, and he holds.
Okay, I see.
Yes, and then he
Yeah,
holds
yeah, yeah.
but then at that point he holds all 4, which no one had done since Bobby at the
Right.
time. So
But then it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, yes, fewer people played golf at the time. So, there's more people who play golf today. So is it more challenging that the courses are longer, there's more bunkers. But then at the time, I mean, you should see some of the equipment these guys used. And they also
right,
didn't have
Yeah.
yardage. They didn't have yardage markers.
yeah,
The greens were like putting on fairways today. If that. I mean, it
it's
was
so different. Yeah,
you couldn't mark your ball. Like if you had mud on your ball, you couldn't wipe it off. Like there was the stymie rule where you couldn't move if you were putting and someone was in your line. Well, that sucks.
I would hate to play that kind of. It sounds fun and not fun all at the same time.
Yeah.
Last big question before we let you go. Talking about that legacy part, Eastlake is a critical part of his post career, during career, childhood, everything. What's his connection with that golf course in Atlanta?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess it started when he was young, like when he was 3, 4, 5, 6. He had a lot of health issues. He couldn't stomach solid food till he was like 5 or 6 years old. Um, he was constantly getting sick, and he was an only child. But in 1907, his father and his mother, that it's just them three. They lived on, I believe it was on, I can't remember which street, but they lived in downtown Atlanta because his dad was starting his own law firm. But they noticed that, I mean, they were like, okay, well, the bustling streets, let's move out to the summer for 3 months and see if this will help our son's health or whatever. RP, his father, Robert Permitas Jones, had, grew up in the foothills of Appalachia, spent his childhood barefoot and all that stuff. So they move out to Eastlake, which is kind of, it was like an unincorporated part of Atlanta at the time. It had recently it became its own municipality for a couple years, but then whatever. But it was only about 5 or 6 years old, like when they started the Atlanta Athletic Club. So right now the AAC and the Eastlake are completely separate. But at this
Yeah.
time, Eastlake was the AAC's summer colony, they called it. That was the country club. The AAC was downtown. And so they were members of the AAC. And when the golf course opened a few years earlier, that's actually kind of when his parents started picking up the game. And so they spent a summer there. Miraculously, his health improved. Who knows? We don't have the evidence from it was probably a combination of things. It wasn't, there's like this mythology that people would say like, oh, golf saved his life. If he hadn't had golf, he wouldn't have. Who knows? But so they spent that summer in 1907, and then the following year they moved to Eastlake permanently, and it was on the old, I believe it was number 2 green, and so that's 1908, and that's when his parents picked up the game. That's when he was just shadowing this guy named Stuart Maiden, who was the golf professional from Carnoustie at the time. And there's this really interesting connection between Atlanta and Carnoustie. For I think the first like 3 or 4 professionals at Eastlake were all from Carnoustie in Scotland. There were other at the like at Druid Hills, who the Adair family founded. Um, Real quick sidebar: Perry Adair was his best friend growing up. Adair. His father, well, the Adair family owned a lot of real estate in Atlanta. They built what is now Druid Hills, the neighborhood, Druid Hills Golf Club. Um, and Mr. Adair had actually helped found or establish Eastlake. But so anyways, there's this really interesting connection between Carnoustie and Atlanta, and that matters because there was this very unique thing called the Carnoustie swing. Up until that time, most golfers kind of had very loopy swings, and it was like you kind of pivot your whatever. But the Carnoustie swing was very known for kind of keeping your feet, I guess, as can't really demonstrate here, but really focusing on shoulder and hip rotation because of how strong the winds were and how quick a lot of the greens and how bumpy and how much you needed to bump and run. So the whole point of it was getting it high enough where you could still kind of spin the ball, but then keeping it low enough to pierce the swirling winds. And so that's why Atlanta, not only Jones, but Perry Adair, there was Alexa Sterling was the top, people don't talk about her. She was the top female golfer before Jones in the United States. Then there were several other golf, and Atlanta really becomes a hotbed not only in the south of golf, but across the United States. And a lot of this had to do with this Carnoustie connection and the Carnoustie swing, especially Stuart Maiden. But I guess to answer your question about the Eastlake connection, this is Jones's home club even until the day he dies. Even though he founds Peachtree in 1948, he founds Augusta in 1931. He would always consider Eastlake as his club. It was very sentimental to him and to his family and to basically his entire community or the people that he associated with.
If you go in the
Can I get
clubhouse
a?
there, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say, can I get my Eastlake plug in here? I think it makes sense. Just Tom Cousins did pass this way.
Yes.
He
Mhm.
basically revitalized Eastlake from kind of a forgotten-ish state, I think is a fair way to put it.
Mhm.
So definitely a name to keep in your mind for those that don't know Tom Cousins. Flames,
Yeah.
Hawks, Chiefs, the Omni, GWCC first building, the building with the two like cathedral-looking tops, big name. Definitely a
Yeah.
big piece of news for. I mean, I would say if Bobby Jones is number one out there, Tom Cousins was probably number two in terms of the Renaissance and getting the permanent tour
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
out
Cousins
there.
is why
So,
the course is
anyways,
even relevant now. That's why probably is even
there we
there.
go.
That course may have
Had
died.
to say that at
Yeah.
some point in this podcast, and there
No,
we
I
go.
think that
Now I
I
can
think
check that
it's
off.
I think it's great you brought that up. And, unfortunately, maybe it was probably my fault. I didn't do the best job trying to reach out to him or to speak with him because I believe Tom
Mm,
Cousins did know Jones.
mm,
They were different. They were not contemporaries. Jones was much older, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, Cousins he did revitalize that. Eastlake, and now there's the tour championship there. Now there's the Charlie Yates course there. That's Charlie Yates was a younger guy, kind of had a similar who idolized Jones, but very similar background.
Tech golf
Um,
legend.
yeah, him and he won I believe a national championship, right?
He
Or he was
won
a national
something.
champion.
He won something. He there is a team award called the Charlie Yates Award for the golf team itself at Tech, and I don't remember if that's the rookie of the year or just overall best player. It's one of the two. But yeah,
I'll
no,
look it up one
yeah,
sec.
they keep him around. But yeah, the Charlie Yates
Okay.
course is my first course that I played. That's my
Oh yeah.
1938 Amateur Championship. There
there
we
it
go.
is. All
I knew
right.
it was
1930.
the M.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my usual
Yeah.
haunt. That yeah,
Well,
Charlie Yates is my usual haunt.
I just thought of something real quick. I don't know if this is another Georgia Tech connection, but there was a guy named Watts Gunn,
Hmm.
probably the all-name team if we're really talking about
Yes.
a great name. He was Georgia Tech's first. I believe I think he won in 1926. This was like it was not the NCAA golf, but it was the college golf at the time. He was a national champion at Georgia Tech. He was 3 years younger than Jones, but he was a very interesting. He was from Macon, Georgia, but his family moved to Atlanta. So when he got to Georgia Tech, and in 1925 U.S. Amateur, actually, it was the first time that not only two golfers from the same city, but the same home club, same college squared off against each other in the finals at Oakmont where it was just played.
How about that? Nice,
Yeah.
nice. But yeah, if you go to if you get the chance to play at East Lake or go there for the tour championship or something like that, basically the main floor of the clubhouse is just stocked
Mhm.
full of Bobby Jones memorabilia. They got replicas of all the trophies that he won on routes to the 1930 Grand Slam and a bunch of other stuff in there. It's a
Mhm.
very nice building that they've renovated. So
The
they
AAC has that too up in Gwinnett County. They have like it's
yeah
basically like a miniature Bobby Jones museum.
yeah they got a lot there, and then the Atlanta History Center I want to say also had something for a hot sec if it's not still there. I don't remember if it's still not there, if still there or not.
So I'm not
It
sure if it
was the
is.
last time I went,
Okay.
but that was about a
Okay.
year ago.
I
So
think that was maybe coming offline at some point. I could be wrong. Y'all can check that online.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some of his papers there at Atlanta History Center, but his main
Yep.
papers are at Emory. So I would encourage if you're interested to kind of look through those.
Nice. Uh, well, what comes next for you? So you defended it. If people want to read this, how would they find a way to read this entire? This like, I'll just call it a book. Your book on Bobby Jones at this
Ah,
point.
yeah, well, so I appreciate that. I now I just kind of have the revisions to make. So there's a lot of bureaucratic hoops you got to jump through in academia. But
Yes.
so now once I incorporate the feedback and the revisions, I'll submit that next month. For all intents and purposes, I'm done because I'm not enrolled anymore, and I'll technically walk in December because Georgia Tech
Nice.
doesn't do summer graduations. But
Nope.
right now, I am looking for jobs. I kind of I don't want to get too into it, but I don't think I'll be going the academic route. I came here thinking I wanted to be a history professor and, kind of like Johnny, but very, uh, it's a very unstable job market and
Yeah.
there's not much security. So, I'm trying to pivot. So I'm
No.
hoping next
Fair.
time I talk to you guys, I got something lined up, but
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
see.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, go ahead, Jake.
I was gonna say, well, you're welcome back here literally anytime that you want to stop by. If you just have something that you want to get words out or just say hello, you're always welcome. And you can also find us offline for maybe a football tailgate or something like that
Well, that'd
if
be
you're in the
awesome.
neighborhood.
That'd be
So
And
nice.
I really appreciate, college football is probably my favorite sport, so I can talk college football all day.
There you go. Good. Good. Love it.
Gonna need it.
In the rare shot, well, I don't think we're scheduled to play Mizzou in literally anything in any sport in the near future. But if that ever happens, we'll know who to call. Uh,
Oh, that's great.
Eric, I appreciate you so much. This was awesome.
Hey,
For us sport nerds and stuff like that, this is candy for us anytime. So I really appreciate you coming on.
I dig it, man. I'm just honored that you guys invited me, and it was awesome talking to you. I can do this all day. So whenever you need me, let me know.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eric.
all right. Well, I'm gonna take over here for a quick plug of section103.com. This is a convenient time after a great interview with Eric to talk about a company that will sell you historic and faux historic Georgia Tech merch. That, of course, is at section103.com. Section 103 has plenty of options, including modern logos as well, of course. But if we want something that is a bit of a throwback, the Georgia Tech #1 national champions 1990, also relevant this month, but for other reasons we can talk about in a little bit there. They have that in men's and women's cuts on a gray background. Tell people when Georgia Tech's national championships occurred: 1917, 1928, 52, 1990 on that shirt. I have it. I love it. You can get North Avenue Trade School and Juniors Grill shirts there as well. There's something, like I said, from all times, all ways, but definitely love the throwback stuff in particular here on this fine podcast. But yeah, gents, that's section103.com. Remember to use FTRS 10% off. Tell them we sent you. And remember, free shipping when you hit the $80 threshold every day of the week. Keep an eye out there as well for deals and things like that. But yeah, let's roll back to volleyball. But first, that was a great chat with Eric. I'm feeling very
Yeah.
energized for these upcoming seasons. I don't know. July is kind of a check out on sports other than checking the Cubs score kind of month for me. So I
We're,
feel like I'm back.
we're so checked out. It's not even July anymore. It's August 3rd.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Eric's fantastic. I got to interview him in the winter actually because I did some material for the Georgia Tech Alumni Association about Bobby Jones, and so he was my first go-to guy to fill in some gaps for me. And I was like, hold on a second, I know what we need you for in about 8 months, and it finally happened. So it was great to have that. Yes, it's volleyball time. The schedule is out. This is our ritualistic thing we do where we basically just read the schedule to you, but we're going to talk about how we feel about it. I'm going to preface all of this by saying, and all of our offensive production is gone from last year. Logan Wiley transferred to Miami. Tamara Oatsnake graduated. Actually, the only person that's left is Bianca Bertolino graduated / was playing for the Atlanta Vibe. The only person that's left with any serious offensive production is Larissa Mendez. So she's at this point target number one as far as we know that we even know how good she is, level of everything like that. Has a powerful strike, which will probably be better this year. If you want to go back, scroll way back on our feed. We talked with Kurt Hoyt, and he gave us some quick primer about, some months ago about who was coming in. But honestly, we will not have a great idea about how good this team is until they start playing games. And that starts August 16th with the intra-squad scrimmage Saturday. That's a Saturday. It's at 4 o'clock. You can go. And then the next Saturday, they play Auburn in a scrimmage as well. That'll be at O'Keefe Gymnasium at 1 o'clock that Saturday. So I will be there because that's how I'm gonna find out how good this team is, or at least how good they seem right now after training camp and whatnot. So any preseason-esque thoughts before? I mean, we'll do a proper preview episode, I think, in a couple weeks here. But just anything you want to get out before we start schedule analyzing?
This is a tip to, or like a really bad segue into talking about the schedule already, but like for a team that does feel in many ways like it's rebuilding for the first time in a long time and not retooling, this is not a schedule that for a team that is rebuilding versus retooling.
Yeah.
There are some nasty games on here. Like reading this now on August 3rd, like there are some fixtures on here that make me feel deeply uncomfortable.
It's not easy. This is true. I mean, Michelle Collier is always, she likes scheduling hard. She knows that she wants to get the tests in. That's been what they've done the last few years early on. They've beaten Penn State early on. They've done what they have done generally pretty well in those early season. Like we beat Ohio State back to back in their building a couple years ago. Like but then again, that was with those teams, with those All-Americans that were like, okay, we knew what we had. We knew we could beat almost anybody any given day if we're doing well. We have no idea how good this team is. Does she think they can beat Purdue in their own building, who is probably going to be a top 10 team during that game? Who knows? But we're doing it anyways. So, I'm not. And the good thing is, though, two of our first three games are against non-P4 teams in Wofford and Arkansas State. There is an Ole Miss game in there. But at least
I love how you picked out like the filter is so intense because you're like, two of the first three, that's fine. Because the fourth game is Purdue.
Games.
Well, but hold on.
Go ahead.
Ole Miss is not an infrequent tournament.
No, I jumped around there.
And last year too.
They have been in the tournament of late. Maybe not last year, but
yeah.
No.
And I would add the last time that they played Ole Miss, it was to open a season at Ole Miss, and they had to go the distance in order.
Oh no,
I thought they went to the distance and won, but it took going to distance to actually make it versus a not so great Ole Miss team that year, if I remember correctly.
It was either they went the distance and lost, or they lost to Illinois the next day. This is gonna bug me. It's gonna bug me.
All I remember is that we were like, "What's going on?" after that match for an early season game. I want to say that was still when Bergman was here. Anyway, so that is how the season begins. We play Wofford, Ole Miss, and then Arkansas State in O'Keefe the weekend of August 29th to 31st in the Georgia Tech Classic. And then we head for a midweek to late week stretch at the Stacey Clark Classic. That is the Purdue little mini tournament they've got. We play Purdue, Kansas, and Bowling Green on consecutive days from September 3rd to September 5th. I'm really happy we're doing a like Big Ten kind of like they've been doing these at Big Ten games for a number of years here, especially with Ohio State. I'm glad we're getting Purdue on the schedule to kind of rotate around the really good Big Ten teams. We played Wisconsin last year. We've had to face Nebraska 2 years ago. So like they're
play Wisconsin this year, Jack.
And hey, I was getting there. That was 2 games away. I was in 2 games. I'm getting there. So we'll have some I just in terms of just fun logos on a screen kind of thing. I'm glad we're gonna have this cool little thing that we're doing up there.
Can't do helmet games in volleyball, so this is like a net game. Like how does this a jersey game? I don't know. How does this work?
I got a roster comment that I tried to squeeze in earlier. are we gonna have a natural point for this later, or are we only talking schedule? Because I don't want to alarm people with the following like screed that we're about to go on about how difficult the rest of the schedule is.
Do that. Just do that now because we're here now.
Okay, so before we all freak out when we flip over, because we've already seen Purdue on there, and it's just tough sledding from there. I want to point out 17 names on the roster. 10 are going to be new, but among the 7 that return, Liv Mogridge, Larissa Mendez, Heloise Suarez, just from those 3, that's a pretty good start to build around. Pierce,
That's good.
Bellis, Boese, Laura Martinez Casas, at least they've been in the building. Jack, I feel like my big thing before we get into these are all scary and hard is there is going to be a huge amount of possible variance from what we just don't know yet.
Yeah.
And we're seeing both teams that we saw in the tournament in these next 2 games, Tennessee and Wisconsin, right? The team that plays those 2 is going to inherently look very different. But Mogridge, Mendez, Suarez, I feel like it 3 players does not a whole team make. And we've seen what this team has looked like in spells without Mogridge last year. But high variance is going to be the name of the game this year. I don't think we can say it any other way, given the difficulty and the freshness. So with that being said, difficulty is gone.
Difficulty goes up now.
Buddy.
Now, I do want to point out we did beat Tennessee last year. That was kind of a surprise with how that team was doing late in the year, but they got through Tennessee. It was a fantastic win. It really was a good. I think it punctuated that season on a high note that they really needed to kind of make that season feel somewhat of a success after the late season slide they had against in some painful matches I don't want to talk about. And then they faced Wisconsin in their own building, and that is very hard to do, and they did not win that match, but that is honestly not to be unexpected.
One clarification. It's Wisconsin at home. When he says their own building, it's at home.
Well, last year we faced Wisconsin in their building in the tournament. This year, I was gonna say we at least get them here, which is gonna be very. That is gonna be an electric night inside O'Keefe. Is what that is like. Circle the calendar. If you don't have season tickets and you can somehow find your way into the building, that's gonna be the night. Because oh my God, is it gonna be loud inside O'Keefe that night? I might bring earplugs. It should be that loud. So that's just gonna be awesome. I mean, I pray to God where this team has shown that they're on the high level of that variance, and it's like, okay, they can match up with this team. Then the next weekend is fun. Only a single match. It's just against Georgia, but it is our McCamish match that we talked about this in the pod a couple weeks ago. The McCamish game is against Georgia. It's a 7:00 game. It's no reason we shouldn't be able to. I mean, hopefully we can set our attendance record again. That'd be awesome. It's doable. We have not sold out the entire lower bowl for a volleyball match yet, but why the hell not this game?
I think it's something good about this too, and we talked about this a couple of years ago when this fixture was the first home game. There are 4 home games in front of it. And so they'll have time to not only adjust to the actual season, but given that they don't have a midweek that week, it'll be assumedly, it'll be a full week of practice in that building.
Yeah. So and I bet that was somewhat purposeful because they've talked about this in the past that the sight lines are very different compared to O'Keefe. O'Keefe is a tiny little box compared to the relative openness of McCamish. There's no wall 5 feet from where you want to aim the ball. It's just more floor basically because it's the rest of the basketball court.
Right. So it's a higher ceiling and the scoreboard. So anything gets immediately harder to judge the height, weight, pace, like all of that stuff. So having a full week to adjust to that, I think is going to be really awesome. The problem is that the next week they play Miami and Florida State. They host Miami and Florida State at home. And those are 2 teams that have given Tech trouble.
A big note:
the last few years.
They usually give us trouble. Those matches have been the reason why we have had significant late season skids. But that's something I'm happy about this year. It is specifically not late in the season, right before we play the 2 or the 3 best teams in the conference this year. It is at the very front of it. It's right after we've had some 3 straight pretty significant tests between Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Georgia. And we get them in our own building, which is it's so nice that we're getting them at this stage of the season and not where we usually catch them, where they basically become trap games if we, for whatever reason, just do not perform at the level we know they can. So I'm happy about this.
Can I briefly take another aside to say you noted not getting 3 of the best teams in the conference right to end the year. 3 of our last 4 games are Louisville, Stanford, and Pitt. So
No, I mean that's what I meant. I meant it's like
Oh.
it would roll
Okay.
into it rolls into that usually. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. That was
Okay,
my that.
I took the complete opposite meaning
No,
out
it's
of
fine.
that, so
It's
my
fine.
apologies.
Well, you say that, and then we play Pitt 2 games later.
Yeah,
Oh, but
exactly.
listen to this. This is an insane road trip, by the way, because on Friday they'll play in Dallas versus SMU, and then they'll get on a plane and fly to Pittsburgh to play Pitt
Well,
on Sunday.
I'm pretty sure we did this
So
last year
At
because
noon. At noon.
that is rough. That is rough. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is what happened last year because SMU and Pitt are travel partners.
Yeah.
In the in
what?
volleyball. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, they
Yep.
are.
What? Because you
That's
have
Go
to put
figure.
you have to put Stanford and Cal together because duh. So I guess
Yep. That's I don't know why they didn't put Notre Dame because I believe Notre Dame's
What?
closer to Pitt to SMU. Not that anyone's close to SMU, but I don't know I don't know why they made that call. But
Notre Dame and
it's
Louisville have
fine. We're
been
not paying
pretty
SMU any money
pretty
at any
standard
point.
travel
So
partners the whole time they've been in the league. It'd be pretty weird to break up Louisville and Notre Dame on that. But
yeah. Oh,
anyways,
fair. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Then we get Duke and North Carolina at home, who have just been slowly and steadily been getting better and better and making games harder against us. I really hope this isn't the year they beat us. And then Wake Forest and NC State. We just get all the North Carolina teams literally in a row: Duke, North Carolina, Wake Forest, North Carolina State.
it reads like a tennis schedule in
It
that
really
regard.
does, and it's scaring me.
That's a really
Uh,
specific reference.
so that is the mid October stretch, and then it's not awesome after that. We host Cal and Stanford on the last this Friday, October 24th, and Sunday, October
the
26th.
one thing you can say about those two is at least you get them at home. Like especially the Stanford
Yes.
one, you're
Yeah.
not playing like the rest disadvantage is on the West Coast team's side
Yeah.
for those rather than being on your end. So especially for Cal, right? That plane ride is going to be basically Thursday morning or like Wednesday night to
Yeah.
get to Atlanta, get into training, and then play on Friday night. So like Stanford it's obviously Stanford's a top 5 team by Evolve rankings to end last year. Cal at least is a little bit of a palate starter, not palate cleanser. Palate cleanser
Yeah.
would come after, but you get what I'm going
Yeah.
for. You
Yeah.
get some prep for that kind of opponent.
Yeah. And they've generally made the schedule pretty balanced for Stanford and Cal to where they're not having to travel back-to-back weekends, so they'll have been at home the weekend before, then they come do the Clemson Georgia Tech swing with Cal that weekend. And then we get the Virginia teams on the road, so we go to the Virginias for the Cavs and the Hokies, and then this is the stretch of the season right here. It's from Virginia through the Clemson games is where if we seriously need to pick up some wins, we can pick up some wins here because it's going to be Virginia, Virginia Tech, Boston College, Syracuse, Clemson, Clemson, all in a row.
That is really the only squishy part of the schedule,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like you can't really count the first 2 games because it's effectively like those first, that Wofford, that Arkansas State. Even that Arkansas State team has been pretty decent. I remember playing them before, but like that's still that's still early season. You don't know what you're getting. Here is
yeah.
the squishy part of the schedule. If you really need to pick up some steam, because that finish, just like last year, is miserable.
I
It is
seriously hate how they do
miserable.
this for scheduling. I get it's good television, but man, it's so annoying. Anyways, the last 2 weeks of the season. Friday versus Louisville. We do not go to the LNN House of Pain this year. Thank God. And we only play Louisville the one time. We do not have a scheduled pairing with them. Our scheduled pairings where we do homes and homes are Stanford, Pitt, and Clemson. And then we have Notre Dame. Hopefully that's a fine win. And then we go to Stanford the day before Thanksgiving, fly home for Thanksgiving, and that's a 9 o'clock first serve there in California. Thursday, have Thanksgiving. Friday, clean old fashioned hate. Saturday in football, and then Saturday, season finale in volleyball against Pitt and O'Keefe.
That is one of the most miserable fixture timings. A 9 p.m. tip at Stanford for an East Coast team in the middle of the week. It is like built in a lab to be so disadvantageous for an East Coast team.
I know.
It's so ridiculous.
I know. I mean, good on Stanford. Good on Stanford. I mean, this could have been like a
good
this
on
could have been
Stanford for juicing it at a time that they probably need it, but like
Yeah.
especially at the tail end of the season in that way. But
yeah. Yeah,
You
this
could not
could
have built a worse situation
right.
to
People
end the
aren't working
season
that
on.
day. Like that's a by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No one in the United States is really working anyway. So this totally could have been like a 4 o'clock Eastern tip off or something like that. But yeah, they're doing 9 o'clock. This is the exact same thing that happened last year, where we played Stanford on Wednesday, had Thanksgiving, football happened on Friday, and then the Pitt game happened on Saturday. Last year we lost in 5 sets to both Stanford and Pitt, and had the 8 overtime thriller in football. So I am just hoping my heart is not as probably likely enlarged as it was by that following Sunday last year after Thanksgiving, because godly that was the worst week ever. Uh, and then hopefully NCAA tournament after that. As we mentioned before, a lot of variance in this roster. So in terms of like, I don't even want to predict where our ACC's roundup's going to be. They got selected sixth in the conference preseason poll, which is close to where they finished last year. I want to say when it was all said and done. So right now they aren't getting picked to jump up, not getting picked to significantly decline. I mean, Collier's teams have shown very good consistency over the years through multiple roster iterations. So I have no reason yet to believe that they're about to fall off a cliff by any stretch of the imagination. So that's where I'm at. We'll have a bigger preview thing here. Just to point out some other stats, 16 of these 29 matches are against tournament teams from last year. 7 of them finished in the top 25. And then the Elite Eight teams they play are Pitt, Stanford, Louisville, and Wisconsin. Wisconsin being the one that we lost to in the round of 32 last year. And Larissa Mendez was put as a preseason All ACC player, which is awesome to see. So, any last second bits? If you want to buy tickets, also there's very few that you can get from O'Keefe games, but otherwise buy for the McCamish game. That's how you'll get in the building for sure if you don't have season tickets. Any last second thoughts before we go to the rest of the news? I see nothing. All right, we'll move on. Football camp has started. Guys have been media folks have been out there a lot. Felt worth noting that this is Brent let all the tech media there for the entirety of the first 2 days, which is not necessarily normal for that. So I don't know. I don't want to read too much into that, but I don't know. I guess you feel confident about your team if you don't mind the general public having a clear shot into your practice for the first few days of it. So I don't know. That probably means
It's
nothing.
also like a media strategy thing too,
Yeah.
though. Like
Yeah.
you have multiple other coaches that have gone on the record like kicking media out of their
Yeah.
practices this preseason, and this is like a recurring theme. We do this every preseason with coaches getting mad at the media. it's practice, man. Like you also only
Not a
have them
game.
for a limited amount of time. Like,
Yeah.
come on,
Yeah.
get over yourself. Like you are but a like.
It's fine.
I'm gonna
It's
get
fine.
really upset.
It's fine. Nothing to worry about there. First Saturday in the flats happened yesterday. If I'm not mistaken, Haynes King stayed for at least an extra hour to make sure he got through the line of people that were looking for his autograph, which is really cool of him to have done that on what basically was a day off for him. The rest of some news and notes here. Benjamin Reuters, number 22 on the PGA University rankings. That is of note because the number one player on that at the end of each year automatically gets a tour card in the PGA Tour. So if he can somehow find his way to the number one slot, he can get himself a tour card. Crystal Lamprecht was number 2 at the end of his season, which is why he did not go straight to the PGA Tour after that season. Eileen Morales was named. It was nominated for the Sports Illustrated All Quarter Century team for softball, which is awesome. At the same time, do we know if Jen Yee's also nominated? Did she not get nominated too? Or is it just
I
Eileen?
didn't see anything online for that, which struck me as a little weird, but I don't know.
All right, well.
I was just flipping through ramblinrec.com, seeing what was interesting since we last talked.
All right, well, that's cool. Eileen's good. I mean, we'll take it. That's some cool stuff. And then Jamal Haynes and Keelan Rutledge were named preseason All ACC as well. Honestly, this is the biggest note of the week: is that we hired Brent Jones as our executive deputy AD. Brent Jones was the athletic director at Troy. Troy has been on the up and up ever since Brent got there. I mean, they've been really good at baseball, getting better at football. He was a name for the actual job that shoot, who's our AD's name now? I'm already forgetting his name. I'm so stupid.
Ryan
Alpert.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. He was in there with Alpert for potentially getting the job, and he's taken the number 2 role, which is a great sign. I think that we're getting such an up and coming star in this business side of college athletics, and he's wanting to be the number 2 here. So, in general, that's a really, really good sign. We also get a new women's basketball player, Deborah Mukiba, a Belgian national, Boston College transfer. Another Boston College transfer. We just keep grabbing their players every year or so. And then Jalen Payton. He signed with the Braves. And based on recent performance, who the hell knows? He might play for them by September if we keep running out of pitchers. So who knows? Uh,
Hey,
that's
I wanted to plug on the Troy thing real quick, Jack.
Yeah.
Obviously, finances are looking pretty good for them. That was a big piece of it. But if we want to talk sports success, Troy football been very consistently good. Troy baseball has been ranked in polls in the last year or two. I think both of them. Softball's given pretty good fights to some good teams, and men's and women's basketball have been in the mix for championships there too. So I think that's uh, pretty key to highlight there. It's not just it's some guy who's local and you can raise some money. It's like no, they've
he's
been
good.
like capital S successful in the ways that are like fun sports things, not just like
Right.
I don't root for a stack of money. During a game, right? Like
No.
I want to see volleyball win or football win, like not like ooh, we got dollars, So,
Right. No, we don't have a poker team.
exactly. If
Yeah.
we
Who
did,
knows? Who
then I
knows?
would root for stacks of money.
Exactly. Maybe we will have one day. I don't know. All right. I think that's all we've got in terms of looking forward for the site. For those that read from the rumbleseat.com, we are getting a site. There is a site-wide refresh of the websites coming on at SB Nation on Tuesday. So the website's going to look a little different. There's going to be a little thing on the side that'll be a new prominent thing called the feed, which treat it as like a Reddit board inside our website. And so if you have like little thoughts and things like that they just want to yap about with other Yellow Jacket fans, you can do it right there. And we have access to that. We'll throw some things up there as well, just random thoughts you may have or little things that maybe don't necessarily need to be full post, but it's like, hey, this happened, and then we'll be able to throw those there. So that'll be a cool little sidebar thing for us that we'll have. But otherwise, yeah, the website's gonna look brand new, and then our 100 Days of Football series is continuing on. We got schedule previews out now, which are gonna be really really fun, and then from there we got volleyball. We'll do our volleyball preview soon. We'll do our football preview soon, and then shoot, the game's gonna happen. My goodness,
Yeah,
we're
it's
20
coming.
we're 20 days away from actual college football and Farmageddon kicking off out in Dublin, Ireland, the second home of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Uh, so I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm just ready for toe to meet leather. That's where I'm at. I would like to see that happen soon. But outside of that, we'll keep on checking, keep doing our thing. Jake, you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, as always, this podcast has been brought to you by from therumbleseat.com. That is our website. Jack said it's new. Go check it out. Interact with us there. We'd really like to see you over there. You can also email us from therumbleseat@gmail.com. Blue Sky, I'm over there. Jake Grant, 98, I believe. Jack's over there. Jack Nicholas, FTRS blog. Akshay, Game on Paper. Jack, Game on Paper. We're papering, right?
Oh, we are, man.
We're papering for another year. You can find Section 103 at section103.com and at Section 103 on Instagram. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as well under the handle From the Rumble Seat. And you can find this podcast wherever fine podcasts are distributed. Please remember, tell your friends, give us a review. We do appreciate it. And every direct recommendation is the most likely way to get somebody involved with what we do. And we really do appreciate it. In the meantime, good night, good luck, and